So Steve Sherlock here in the Franklin TV studio today to talk about stormwater with some cool folks to talk with stormwater with. On my right, we've got Derek Adams and Kate Soberg.
Mm-hmm.
And on my left, we've got Melanie Hamblett. Stormwater has been around, well, forever. The stormwater bylaw got introduced to start Franklin's mitigation efforts in 2008, and it's been really increasing since then because of EPA regulations. Is that correct?
That's correct, yep. So to give a quick overview, the town of Franklin needs to abide by the Clean Water Act as we purvey groundwater for drinking water. The town of Franklin must also abide by the MS4 permit because it's part of the Charles River watershed and it reaches certain parameters with population density. Most importantly, we need to keep the water that's in Franklin clean. And the taskings that are set forth by the EPA underneath the MS4 permit are judicious in the sense that none of Franklin's stormwater is treated chemically, which is sometimes misunderstood by certain residents. And we just need to make it explicitly clear that Franklin stormwater does not get sent to a treatment plant. It is treated in the sense that we have deep sump catch basins and rain gardens and detention basins, but there's no chemical treatment from Franklin stormwater. So a lot of the work that's going to be done is enhancing our ability to treat the stormwater that's in Franklin.
I think that's a good point to reemphasize. So while we see the stormwater drains along the streets and parking lots, et cetera, that goes to a separate stormwater mitigation system, if you will. It doesn't get intermixed with the sewer, which then goes into the treatment plant.
That's correct, and that brings up another good point where Franklin is a separate sewer system for our stormwater. So some older cities have a combined sewer overflow where during a heavy rain event, the rainwater, which becomes stormwater, will overflow into the sewage, and then that will overflow into the environment, which is not the case for Franklin. But to speak to your point, all of Franklin's stormwater gets discharged directly into the environment. So with that, what we need to do is increase the amount of street sweeping that we're doing, the catch basin cleaning that we're doing. We need to build more infrastructure to treat the stormwater because each of our 450 plus outfalls has been tested and we're continually monitoring those to ensure that the parameters that for the water quality that we're discharging is within acceptable parameters.
Mm-hmm. And one of the key reasons as well, and there's certainly others we'll get into and as we go through this session, but one of the key reasons is going back to DPW Director Brutus Cantarighi and his triad. It's really the mix of drinking water, stormwater, and wastewater. Mm-hmm. We live off our aquifer. Mm-hmm. So the water going into our aquifer, the better we can make it, mm-hmm. the safer we'll be coming out with the drinking water as well.
That's absolutely right. And the way that I like to think about it is if we're salting the roads, which is necessary for the safe passage of vehicles, that salt doesn't just disappear when it melts, when it melts the snow and then gets carried to the storm drain. That quantity of salt is going to end up discharged somewhere. So what we're trying to do, to use that as a visual, is capture those contaminants, if you will, before they get to the environment, and then they can be cleaned out and disposed of properly.
Mm-hmm. So also to kind of set the stage while we're in the studio today, 3 years ago, we were also coincidentally in the studio with some of the conversation clearly over time. What had been mentioned then kind of got tweaked as the questions and answers, et cetera, got resolved. And now coming July 2023, there's a stormwater fee that will be implemented. And that's why we want to make sure that folks understand what it is and clearly why we're doing it, which is what we've started talking to. But then the key piece we'll spend time on here is what they can do to mitigate the charge. Because there are some mitigation steps. You won't be able to alleviate all of it. You'll still have to pay something. That's why there is a fee. But there are steps that people can do to validate that they're getting charged appropriately and can take steps to reduce their costs.
That's correct. So historically, the stormwater taskings have come out of the highway budget. And because those taskings are getting so expensive, it's unsustainable to continue that coming out of the general tax base going forward. So what was done was it was put forth in front of town ad hoc committee meeting with solicitation of public input. Many public meetings were held. And then from the ad hoc committee, it was recommended to town council to implement a stormwater utility fee. The stormwater utility fee was determined to be the most fair and equitable way to address our specific issues for our specific town and what we need to accomplish. And it applies to every single parcel in town. There are no exemptions. There is a credit manual, and we provide the option for abatements, but every single parcel in town, no matter whether it's a single-family home, a commercial property, a faith-based institution, or an educational institution, we are drawing the funds based on the impervious area that each parcel has as the gold standard across the United States of America for people who have to mitigate their stormwater problems and need a funding source for it, is to base their stormwater utility charge off of impervious area, as it's the amount of pollution, if you will, or contaminants are rather directly tied to the amount of impervious area you have on a property.
And Melanie, I know you led that.
Yes.
I had the honor of leading that ad hoc committee, and you spent a couple of years working through both public hearings, getting some feedback, and modifying the proposals effectively that went to the town council for their formal vote.
Yeah, Steve. Thanks for allowing me to be here today, anyways, to talk about it, because I was the chair of that ad hoc committee, and it was I wanted it to be more of a people to ask questions and we give feedbacks, and it was really dynamic. Like, we changed what we said, how we said things, or added more information to the hearings and the public outreach, the forums that we had, so that we could answer the questions that were out there. And I think Derek brought up a couple of really good points, that one of the things that people talk about all the time and they don't quite realize is that we're already paying for the stormwater work that's going on. The problem is that as the permit gets more and more restrictive, the costs go way up. And so if we want to deplete the entire general budget to do the work, because it's a federal mandate, unfunded federal mandate, that if we don't want to totally delete the budget, we have to come up with another way to pay for it. And it was really the best and most equitable way to do it, so that everybody pays because of how much impervious coverage they have.
All right, so geographically, Franklin has a map, occupies 27 square miles or something like that, and all profit, nonprofit, whatever property owners, they still have to pay. And obviously, the bigger scale, they may have more mitigation opportunities, but even a regular resident can still take some steps.
Yeah, and it's important that you just said that, because people, it was only the homeowner, the property owner, or the business owner, the commercial property owner that was paying the taxes. And so now everyone is going to have to pay into the stormwater and fee, the stormwater utility, to help pay for it. It's not going to pay for all of it. I don't know, maybe Derek can mention how much it will cost eventually per year, but we just can't take all that money out of the general budget and then actually meet the standards of the permits. So and that's really kind of the way we looked at it. It's like, how do we pay for it but actually charge the least amount possible? So when we first started the ad hoc public forum outreaches, I believe the cost per billing unit was about double
What it actually is.
what it will be in July. And so we really spent a lot of time trying to figure out the best way to give people what they need, right? So we need, first thing is we need fresh, clean water. And so that's why it's really important that we do this. And there were a couple other things. There was like clean up leaves and sort of things like that that got removed so that we could lower the price per billing unit.
Right. So just to replay and recap, profit, nonprofit, anybody with property owner space in Franklin based upon the impervious coverage, then they're going to get charged town included. So the town included in that. And yes, nonprofits, whether they're churches or just nonprofit organizations, they're all get covered as well.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things people do ask is like, does the town have to pay?
Yes.
And yes, the town will have to pay.
Right.
But it's still a lot less than paying for the whole permit process for the for the stormwater catch basins.
And Kate, from a GIS perspective, there's been a bunch of work done on the stormwater page so that people can go for a specific address and find out the details.
Yes, exactly. We had a consultant do some work for us in preparation for this, and they spent hours and hours looking at every single parcel in Franklin, developing our impervious area layer. So on the Stormwater Division website, there are links on the left-hand side, one of which is our impervious area map. And if you click on that, you can go and look up your property, and you will see exactly what your impervious area looks like on your property. Our model for impervious area is to capture driveways, buildings, your house, garage, shed, any secondary structures you might have, pathways, pool surroundings, not the pools themselves, but anything around them, patios, anything like that. And what you can do is you can look and you can see if things have been missed, if things are added incorrectly. But it's a great tool for residents to be able to go and look and see exactly what they're going to be paying for and what their utility fee will look like.
And I think in the credit manual, which we mentioned, the process for doing that calculation, so there's a single unit rate, but then depending upon how many thousand square feet of space, then the rate applies. And I believe there's two different mitigations in terms of rebate capabilities or abatement capabilities within that.
So abatement would be a permanent change to your impervious area layer.
Right. So if there's a question in terms of you've captured more than my space, actually,
right,
that's
that would be
issue.
an abatement. Yep. So they could contact me or Kate or anybody at the DPW office. They'll forward the information to us. We'll come out and do a site visit, and whatever exists on the property, we'll make the necessary adjustments. And then the credits manual is separated into two different sections for a maximum credit of 50%. 25% for stormwater treatment and 25% for stormwater storage. So the treatment is because we're trying to keep the stormwater clean. The storage is because we're trying to reduce peak flow velocities during a significant precipitation event. So that's why we did that rather pointedly, to make sure that anybody who's trying to do the right thing and is doing the right thing is eligible for a credit off of their stormwater utility fee.
And then the manual goes into more specifics in terms of, certainly for the larger commercial and even nonprofit spaces like Dean or the Franklin Village Mall. It's certainly been talked of between Walgreens and the Big Y were rather visible when they put in their parking lots. They put in the stormwater capture systems underneath, and that'll allow them to get some credits for that.
Absolutely. So we have a small user credit, which is typically, it applies to all residential units in town, and also any parcel that's 5 billable units or less. And then there's the standard user credit, which would be 5+ billable units, and applies to the commercial properties.
Yep.
Largely, they follow, or they in fact follow that same 25% for treatment and 25% for storage. But of course, a commercial property is likely to have a different set of infrastructure to treat their stormwater than somebody would do on their residential property.
Right. And while we have rain barrels shown here, that's one of the quick and easy ways that a homeowner or even an apartment owner, but the credit would be done through the apartment condo association, however that is. But a homeowner could get a rain barrel and thereby getting some credits that way.
Yes, as long as
it treats 500 square feet of impervious area. So if you have it on the downspout of one of your structures, either your house or a garage or a shed, if it's a small shed that's less than 500 square feet, you're not going to get credit for it. But if it's on your house, you will get credit for it as long as it's capturing 500 square feet. And the great thing about the rain barrels is they're easy to install. They're easy to uninstall in the wintertime when you don't want to be collecting water. It's a really great way to help mitigate your impact on stormwater.
And we'll put a plug in as well. I think it's twice a year the town does a
Twice a
stormwater
year.
purchase.
Yep. We do a spring and a fall rain barrel program. We partner with the Great American Rain Barrel, offering rain barrels at a discounted price to residents. They're $79 a barrel. And the DPW also offers a water conservation rebate, which rain barrels fall under. And the rebates are for $50. So if you just produce your receipt, the town will literally send you a check for $50 towards the cost of your rain barrel. We do have a program currently open. Ordering is through May 7th, I believe.
And then
of
the
this
fall
year.
one would be September, October.
The fall program we usually do in September.
Right.
They're great barrels. I'll put a plug in how good they are.
Yes, Mel, I think you have several, I believe.
I have two.
Yeah.
They have a spout and hoses that you can connect them and get double fill if you want. They're
Right.
really great.
Yeah, I have one as well, and I'm trying to determine whether I put it on the back so it's easier for my garden, or I put it on the front so it just takes the water away from the driveway.
One of the other things I wanted to mention, Steve, is that through the public forums, we actually changed. Not only did we change the price, but we changed what you could get credit for.
Correct.
So we did listen to the public input. We at first the gravel driveways were not going to be allowed to have credit, but I think I know now that they are. Right, Derek?
They are. They certainly are.
Well, they're not. Well, just to clarify, not a credit, but an abatement.
An
So
abatement. I'm sorry.
gravel driveways do not count under our model
Right.
as impervious area. So if you have a gravel driveway, we can remove that from the impervious area.
Right. So that's the difference, and that's a permanent change.
Yes.
In the amount of billable units you have.
Yes.
Right, and you only have to do that once.
Correct.
But for the credits, then you have to, if you have your rain barrel installed, you have to come out. You come out.
Yeah, we
Kate,
do. We do
in-
a field check to ensure that they're hooked up and that they're working properly, and that's something that residents will need to reapply for every year.
And our DPW director, Robert Brutus Cantareggi, thank you for joining us today. While we were talking in terms of kind of the history, this goes back to the stormwater bylaw introduced in, I think it was around 2008, that
Correct.
started the mitigations, and we've been seeing them in a variety of ways around town.
Well, yeah, I mean, Franklin is actually, before the MS4 permit, we were involved in EPA residual designation. Us, Milford, and Bellingham. And that's what really brought it to the forefront. And we started looking at different things. And that was the first time, Franklin pushed back on it. And that was the big one for that was economics. I mean, besides what they wanted to do, they were singling out Franklin, Bellingham, and Milford. And, so we pushed back hard on them, and that permit was never implemented because of that. And that was just Franklin pushing back. The funny thing I always say about that one, that was when we had Senator Brown and Senator Kerry sign a letter in support of Franklin. And I was told by many people that they really didn't like each other, and that was the only letter that they both signed together. Which
Nice.
is really cool
For
at the
Franklin.
time for Franklin. Yeah.
Nice, yeah.
So we did push back hard, and we embraced it, and it worked out well. So that permit went by the wayside, but some of the stuff that EPA learned on that permit, they did try to put into the MS4 permit that came out in 2018. So.
And you actually pushed back even harder, filing a lawsuit against the EPA. So in terms of fighting City Hall, you went even further than that.
It was a lot harder in fighting City Hall because the thing is with when you want to challenge a permit, it's not at the state level because it's the federal government giving the permit out to the state. So when Franklin pushed back, we actually had to go to federal court. We had to sue the feds.
Right.
And so that worked out. It was a long, arduous process. It was kind of cool. I learned a lot. But we went through mediation, and we got some, which we felt, and there was other, don't get me wrong, there's a bunch of other communities that signed on.
Yeah, we were one of the party, but we were one of the leads because of the work we had done, and we could substantiate the objections we were making.
Correct. That's why Franklin, a lot of, and you can probably imagine this, a lot of communities do not want to sue or push back on EPA because you're always afraid of repercussions, or just most people look at everything that EPA says is correct. You know, and so if you're the town that's pushing back, then they're thinking like, we don't want to do what's right. And I think through Franklin, there are so many parts of the permit that I do agree with. You know, it was just basically was the cost and the timetable. That was the big thing. But we ended up going through mitigation, and you know, you actually to get your point, Franklin did take the lead, because I think my colleagues over there always say the one thing I always say about EPA: you can't give us an award on one hand and fine me on the other. You know, because we are doing the right thing, and that's why we were chosen to push back. And then with that, we went to mitigation, and what we were able to get out of that was basically a timetable extension, where you know, we're looking at, depending on what estimates you want to say, $60 million to $100 million, and they want to do it in 20 years. That ain't happening. I don't think it's realistic. So we'll be able to, basically what they've stated is that, you know, if a community, whether it's Franklin or anybody else, is showing progress, what they're doing, and they can show that there's you know, capital actually expense issues, but you're working on the getting there, they will definitely work with us. So in any other community. So that was a big win, because timing is everything.
Right. And part of what we were discussing was that certainly the mitigations from a Franklin perspective were coming from the operations budget, DPW, roads in particular, but the operation budget costs, stormwater associated, just kept growing and growing. And then with the MS4 permit, they were going to continue to grow. So how do we make that a more equitable distribution instead of just the taxpayers bearing it? The stormwater fee, utility fee, was introduced so that at least everybody part of Franklin gets to have their share that way.
Yeah, everybody part of Franklin. It's also more proportionate. That you know, in layman's terms, about a little over 60% of our revenue comes from residential, and the other remaining comes from commercial. Yet when we look at where the impervious is, over 60% of the impervious is on the commercial properties. Yeah. So it does it more a fair and equitable way that way of getting it out there. And then additionally, the old thing is that it's a utility, so if you're using it, which we all technically are, there's no exemptions for it. So nonprofits, if you'd brought that up before, which, you know, everybody knows Dean College, but even I always say, hey, the Federal Post Office, they're going to have to pay, and Mass DOT for their place over there is going to have to pay. So 495 doesn't have to pay, but, you know, the facilities along it. So it's more fair and equitable.
Yeah. And then the town itself.
Yes.
And that, at least we get some of the mitigation, because a lot of the work that you've done, specifically as buildings were getting renovated and or outside grounds were getting renovated, you put in the rain gardens, the tree wells, things of that sort to help. So that'll help even our own calculation from a town budget perspective.
Well, it's huge, and I think Kate has done a lot of the detail analysis. That was another good thing about the permit, that when we pushed back on, I wanted to make sure we got credit back to 2006. So anything we've done pretty much through 2006, and, you know, a lot of folks are familiar with, you talk about tree wells, but it's also a road narrowing program, just improvements in drainage. We get credits, you know, like, you know, some people didn't start until 2018, but we actually got them to go back to 2006. So everything, and we're really good at documenting stuff. So we have all that, we can show it. So that's going to help us out in our permit. You know, it basically means less cost. It's money we already spent, don't have to redo it.
That's really interesting. One of the things that I just thought of, I think you said it, that I hadn't thought of before, was that because the town has put in all of these rain gardens and collection areas, does that mean that the town will get credits for those things on their bill?
We could, but, you know, that's one of the things. It's and we're talking about a policy thing, but I would probably recommend against that, because it's, you know, that money's already been put out forward, and it's part of our plan going forward. And then if we do that, then we still have some money we have to spend. So if we're trying to get credits, that means someone else has to pick up the burden.
Right.
So if you want to sell that as a politician, go ahead.
No, I just think that it's really important to say, like, you know, maybe like you could get a credit, but is it fair? I mean, we should pay our fair.
Correct.
We should pay the bill.
Yeah.
Right. And that's kind of what I
We are
meant.
paying the bill.
Yeah.
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 And now the
A
bill
lot,
is,
a big bill.
We pay it-
And it gets bigger every year.
Yes.
And the permit gets updated how often?
Well, the permit is, well, I mean, there's different phases in it,
Right.
but the permit's like, it's supposed to be basically 20-year permit eventually, but, starts out at 5. But the last one expired, I always make the joke, was it 2006? And then they finally did in 2018. So they were a little late.
just a little.
It got lost.
They were afraid of you, Brutus, I think. Sorry for that interruption.
It was a valid ad.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was good. So back to, from a mitigation perspective, we mentioned the stormwater page. You've got the GIS information there. The credit manual is there so that the individuals, whether nonprofits and or commercial and or residential, they can go and find the information for their particular areas. If there's an abatement, contact you in terms of the overall space calculation. That's the abatement piece.
Correct.
But then if there's other mitigations, as in the stormwater handling or the rain barrel, those are other credit applications.
Yeah, so that's going to be a credit application through a platform that's known as Viewpoint, and it's being built right now, but we're going to accept all the applications online. It should be a very simple process, just a few clicks. It is going to, for the small users credit, it is going to be an annual credit that you're going to apply for, because we need to come out, whether it's us or our colleagues, and inspect and make sure that everything's still hooked up. And the reason, and for the standard user credit, that's a 5-year process. And the thought process behind that is if you have a storm scepter in the ground that's buried, we can inspect it once and remain confident that it's going to be there 5 years.
It's not going to change
It did
magically.
not- no. But we will be reviewing the operation and maintenance and the cleaning schedule for those things.
Sure.
So we are keeping a keen eye on all of it, but from a residential standpoint and a small user credit standpoint, it's going to be an annual application.
Good.
Could I ask a question of Kate?
You may.
Always, Mel.
You mentioned that the rain barrel you can get credit for your rain barrel if it collects 500 square feet of runoff.
Mm-hmm.
What about a rain garden? Does it have to collect a certain amount?
Rain gardens need to collect a certain amount to be efficient, and that is not a question I'm qualified to answer because I am not a civil engineer. But they have to be built in a way that they can capture whatever they're trying to capture, whether it's your driveway or if it is all of your roof runoff. A rain garden is essentially a big hole. And so that hole has to be big enough to capture a certain amount of rainwater. And so that is something that has to be determined by someone who has a license.
Those qualifications.
So
Yes.
it's not as if I could go out and dig a hole myself and just like put some rush and some cattails in it. Like it needs to be planned.
It needs to be
Well,
planned. There needs to be a structural drawing done of it. The calculations have to be made to make sure it is going to function the way it is designed to function.
Okay. All right, great. Thanks. I'm sure people will ask that question.
And if they haven't,
Now that
they can. I think before we get into the specific questions, which I know you've already accumulated since the notification, while we talked originally that we were back here in March of 2020, and then things kind of changed. Stormwater did not go away. It's still here.
it's been here
So
for a
now
long
we're
time.
back here again with the stormwater utility fee becoming effective in July 2023. The notifications have now started catching attention, so we can. You've already been accumulating some questions, so we can go through those. Anything else to add before we get into those? Nope. All right. So somewhat we talked to, but I have a downspout that is directed towards the woods. Does this apply for a credit?
The answer to that is no, it does not. The reason for that is it does not treat stormwater and it doesn't reduce the peak flow velocity of any stormwater that's coming off of your roof and exiting your downspout. An additional component of that answer is that this doesn't specifically have to do with just the direction of flow onto or off of your property from stormwater. We're not monitoring how much rainwater is falling on a specific property. We have a community-based problem that we need to solve. So while I can see the mentality that if you have rainwater from your property that's entering a wooded area, that you should be, a credit should be applied or you should be exempt. The answer is we still have a lot of work to do regardless of that fact. And despite that, we still need to sweep the roads and clean the catch basins and build infrastructure and treat our stormwater. And if you're a resident in town in one way, shape, or form, even if you don't own a vehicle, if you buy something from the grocery store, there's going to be a truck that brought those grocery items from somewhere else to here. And vehicles are dirty things. And there's undoubtedly, no matter what it is, a vehicle is going to drop an ounce or 10 ounces of fluid on the road somewhere at some point. And the town's responsible for cleaning that up. So regardless of whether your water on your property stays on your property or does not, we have a problem that we need to solve. And that's why that no property is exempt. And you will have to pay for your stormwater utility fee.
I think one of the things that Derek brought up is really important for people to remember is that this is a community problem and we have to join together to solve it. And I think this is the best way that we can.
Going back to the fair and equitable piece of the utility fee as it's being implemented.
Yeah. And also, I mean, he said that the water comes out of your downspout, but if you stop the water from your going out your downspout to sit a little bit, right, with a rain barrel, then you could
Yes, absolutely.
get a credit, right?
Yes.
So
Right.
And one other thing, just to add to that, if you have to remember with our permits, all based upon numbers in the Charles River. We're not actually counting them. It's the community as a whole, how much we're contributing. A lot of this permit is based upon what we have to deal with, the phosphorus loading. And in layman's terms, I can say, if you think about it this way, your downspout already going on your lawn, might be going into the woods, it's picking up phosphorus that goes across your lawn. Then it goes in the woods. What's in the woods? We always joke about the leaves. Right? So we got leaves in the woods. And then if you got a dog's pooping out there, it's going in there. So if you think about that way, there really is no improvements. There's nothing because that's a pre-existing number. If you were to take that downspout and put it into the ground and put it into a storm scepter or something like that, or a rain garden, where you can possibly visualize in your mind now that water's going straight down, it's getting treated, and it's water conservation. So that's the one thing about downspout. It's not about where it goes, how it goes. It's how it's treated and what it's done.
And I think in terms of the treatment, picking up on one of our points, it's not being chemically treated, but the design of the rain garden is flowing such that you've got different layers so that the water is filtering down and then naturally treated that way.
Exactly. And that's what our detention basins are doing throughout town, all the rain gardens. The ground is the best filter that we have. And that's what's happening. When that water infiltrates back into the ground, it's filtering out all the contaminants and then going into our groundwater system.
It's not going in the river, basically,
Right.
or the brook.
Right.
yeah, a natural filter. That's like the good point.
And it's cheap.
Another question touches on it, but it comes at it from a little bit different perspective. All the water on my property stays on my property. Can I be exempt from paying the stormwater utility?
Right. So we've seen a lot of variations of this question, and this is just one example of those. But the bottom line is that no property, no parcel is exempt. Everyone's pitching in to solve this problem that we have. We've come a long way, fallen on Brutus largely for all the work he's done over time. And we need to keep that work going, and the tasks are going to increase exponentially. And like he said, it could be 40, 60, $100 million over the course of 20, or if they extend it 30, 40 years. So the fair and equitable way, I know we keep saying that, is to not have anybody be exempt, but we do care to give credit where credit's due, and that's why you can receive a max credit of 50%. But just to touch on the other side of it, regardless of if your water stays on your property or not, you're still utilizing the roadways. And we don't have a terrible localized flooding problem in Franklin. We do have, how many culverts would you say? 70?
Well,
you know,
Over 100.
over 100 culverts. You know, that's another part of the stormwater infrastructure that we need to take care of. Something that you might not even notice is there until there's a problem.
Sure.
We need to proactively take care of all those things, and that's what this funding is going to do.
Yeah, to the culvert point, a lot of those culverts, you drive along the road, and unless you're really paying attention, there's a culvert on either side, and you just drove over it and didn't even know it was there.
Right, exactly.
But that infrastructure still needs to be maintained.
Right.
Exactly, yep, and it
And if it gets blocked or stops functioning, you'll certainly notice.
Certainly.
that's
People notice it when it's overflowing. Yeah.
Yes, when it's backing up, when it's flooding
Onto their property, yeah.
properties. Same thing with catch basins. If they stop functioning, you certainly know about it.
Right.
And we know about it
And
because
we
they
know
call
about
and
it.
yell at us.
Yep.
Yeah. Yes.
And if you walk down the street, you can see them sometimes, though.
You can walking because you're a little bit moving a little bit slower than on a vehicle going by 25,
That's
30 miles
right.
an hour.
That's right. Slow down, everybody. Look for the
Yes.
catch basins.
Another one of the top questions, I think we talked about it before, but specifically as far as the questions, are town facilities subject to the stormwater utility? And
Yes.
they are.
Just like we pay for water.
You
We
pay for
pay for
water,
sewer.
electricity, all that.
Yep.
Well, yeah, water, electricity, sewer, but I'm thinking more of a town type thing.
Town.
Yeah.
And then also we even pay for our own refuse
Trash,
pickup and
yeah.
recycling. So
Right.
we pay for, we're a user like everybody else.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good thing to remind people. The town is a user.
Yes.
It's going to pay the user fee.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. And next question, similar but getting more detailed. Are universities and other tax-exempt organizations exempt from the utility?
They are not, and that
No.
was initially how the whole data layer was developed, and everything was mapped out with the ultimate. We had what we knew that the budget needed to be, and then the only way to accomplish that was to appropriately charge every single parcel in town. So each one is included in the stormwater utility, and there are no exemptions.
For the common good, it got to a smaller fee because everybody's paying their piece.
Exactly.
Correct.
How do I know how much impervious area is on my property?
We talked about that a little bit earlier. Residents can go to the stormwater website and look at the impervious area story map, and they can enter in their address, and they can see exactly how many square feet of impervious area is on their property. It's the entire town is available for anyone to peruse at their leisure.
Right. And then if they do have some question or this is not incorrect, we need the questions and or corrections would at least start through you to do that.
Yes, absolutely. My contact information is on the town website. They can contact me directly or Derek or just our front office. One thing to keep in mind is that when the impervious area layer was created, it was using imagery from 2019. So it's possible that someone has had a shed removed since then and it's still being captured. That's a mistake that we can correct very easily
Sure.
to adjust the numbers.
Yep.
Or they added a shed.
Or they added a
And if
shed.
they want to call us up and let us know that they've created more impervious area, we'd love to hear from them also.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That would be fun.
I always make the joke, Mel, the meters.
Yeah.
No one ever calls and says their water meter isn't working. They always say it's
It's going slow.
Yeah, I know. No one ever tells us that. I don't know why.
And somebody asked, why am I being taxed on the amount of rain that falls on my property?
So I've got this question a couple times, and I think it's just a misunderstanding. And I know we sarcastically made in previous presentations that it's a rain tax, and it just speaks to how involved you need to get with your community to really understand what's going on. And while it does seem like a rain tax, that's not what it is at all. But there are certain people who inquire about how is the town going to measure the quantity of rain that's falling on my property and not somebody else's. And that's just simply not the way that it is. It's just a silly way to have described it as a rain tax, but as we all know, it's a stormwater utility fee.
Yeah, well, when you walk around, the rain's going to fall on you, and it's still going to fall within the town,
Right.
and then the town together needs to adjust and pay for it accordingly.
I was gonna make a plug for people to watch some of the previous public forums that we had, because people at the very first public forum that was in town and in the town chambers, there were people there that thought it was a rain tax, and that by the end of that session, they understood what it really meant, and that they felt like that they were misled by somebody saying that it was a rain tax, that it wasn't a rain tax, and they understood a lot better. So I'm going to ask everybody to go watch that, and that has a lot of really good information in it. And I think we even created a pros and cons table. Kate did about it that people should look up to. That was really important.
Yeah, there's a wealth of info that you can dig deeper into if you need to. It's there. We've talked on, but again, strictly from a question perspective, how is billing structured for condominium owners? I don't think we've mentioned them specifically yet, but
You want to take that one?
Sure. So condominiums are going to be viewed just as a singular parcel.
sort of condominium owner itself, not the individual.
Correct. The owner of the parcel
the-
will be viewed as the singular owner of the entire complex.
I would say the association.
The association,
Association.
yes.
Don't use the
Okay.
owner.
Best
Yes.
term.
Association.
Yep, the association. And the way that the data is viewed, that association will be receiving the fee, the bill, for the entire parcel, and then they will be able to collect the funds as they see fit.
Okay. So individual condominium owners may still see something, but through their association or entity.
That's correct. Individual condominium unit owners will not be receiving an individual bill
Right.
for their individual structure
At
that
least
they
from the
live in.
town.
Yes,
Right.
they will likely see that through their HOA fees.
Yep. And then I think we've talked on, but for the record here, what items and actions are eligible for a credit?
Yep. So like we said before, there's the small user credit, which is 5 billable units or less, and all residential properties, and then the standard user credit. Each of those are eligible for a maximum of 50% credit off of their stormwater utility fee, 25% for stormwater treatment, and 25% for stormwater storage. Just to give an example, stormwater treatment would be a rain garden or a detention basin. Stormwater storage would be a subsurface collection system, like
Or
a Caltech system, as they would
a
say,
rain barrel.
or a rain
Rain
barrel.
barrel.
So there's about 6 to 8 for each. So there's a number of options for the residents to look into.
And that info is found in the credit manual, which
Yes.
is also linked to off the stormwater page that we referenced.
Correct.
Yes.
Yep.
And how often will I be billed?
That's a great question. And we don't know the answer yet. We've been working really hard with the finance department. Our goal is to have it be quarterly on your utility bill. That's our goal.
So effectively, the rate as you would calculate is effectively an annual rate, but then it would be divvied up to be a quarterly piece of
Yes, exactly. So, for example, the average single family home in Franklin, their stormwater utility bill is going to be $56. Ideally, that $56 will be divided by 4 and will appear on each utility bill quarterly. That's our goal.
Sounds good. Quarterly.
And you got to give finance people units.
Yes, they've been working so hard.
They've worked a lot, and we've come a long way recently. So,
Yes.
You know, the billing clearly from a resident and even commercial perspective, it needs to be accurate. And there has certainly been a lot of time and effort, both on the GIS side, on the Munis side, tying the info together so that it'll come out to John Doe, Jane Doe, whoever, accurately. Which is why we also want to start now to at least check. Make sure your area is good, make sure it's accurate, so that when it does start coming out, you'll have had chance, as opposed to getting surprised all of a sudden in July. Whoops, wait a minute.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, and to actually, I mean, to put another plug in for like Derek and Kate's time, like if everyone waits till July to have them come out and see things, they're not going to have time to do it. So let's try to spread it out a little bit and get people and take a look at that impervious map as soon as you can.
and one other thing I just want to touch on the credit manual. It's up online now, and it's still a draft document. The council hasn't officially accepted it yet. So if anybody reads through it and they got some comments, we'd love to hear it. I'm not guaranteed it would be changed, but I think it's a good time to, this is once again the public's opportunity to say, I don't agree with this, or I should get more, and we can take a look at it.
And then we've talked about the impervious area, and I think we've touched on it in some of our other questions, but the impervious area of my property is not accurate. How do I get this corrected? And that's where they start with you.
They start with me, yep, or the front office of the DPW. All it is, it's a phone call or an email to us, and as long as we have permission to go on your property, we're happy to come out and take a look and adjust accordingly.
Right. Make whatever adjustments are necessary. Good. Well, thank you for taking time to go through the questions, to go through the overview, for spending time since 2008 working on this, actually prior, because I think we go credit back to 2006.
Yep.
So as we close this session, any final comments, Brutus?
No, thank you for the job security. This ain't going anywhere anytime soon, so it's No, it's a good thing. We've heard through, like, some people have said, Brutus's tax and this and all the other stuff. No, it's not. It's really we're not inventing the wheel on this. This has been done utilities all over the country, and this is just the best model, the most fair and equitable model. And that's why it was presented and argued and talked about so much of the council. So, and then on the other hand, we got to do the work. It's like it, because we don't want to be Quincy. We don't want consent orders. So that's what we got to do.
Yeah,
Right.
definitely. Ellie, any last minute?
Well, I just wanted to thank Brutus and Derek and Kate and everyone else at the DPW and throughout the town staff. I mean, this has been a lot of work, and it is a community thing. And so when we all work together, I think we can actually get through this. Remember, this is a federally unfunded mandate that no one likes. But we have to do it for the future, the quality of water around us, and it just takes all of us as a community to work together to get it done.
Good. And Derek, any last minute?
So my name and contact information is on the Franklin Stormwater website. If anybody has any questions, they can feel free to reach out and get a hold of me. Also on that website, another important document is the pamphlet that was created about a year ago. And if anybody needs a visual and to see some more numbers behind everything and a sort of a recap of how we got to where we are here, that's a really good resource for that.
And I believe you've got the links on the page and or the DPW page for effectively the history of the presentations as it's developed over time. So if somebody really wants to take the time and do the deep dive, those resources are available.
Everything's right there.
Yeah. And Kate, last but not least.
Thank you for having us, Steve. This was great. If my contact information is also on the website, if anybody has any questions, wants to reach out over the last couple months. I know I think I can speak for Derek. We've had some really great conversations with residents about stormwater. I love talking stormwater. So if any resident ever wants to chat with me about it, I'm happy to do that.
Yes, and especially with the weather being what it is in New England, it's going to rain, snow, whatever. It's going to be here. We're going to have to deal with it. But I think with this particular approach, as we've kind of talked through today and summarized, it's probably the best, most fair, most equitable way of implementing it for everybody. We're all in it together. We'll do that. Thank you for taking time. Thank the TV crew for providing this opportunity for us to record. And to the listeners, if you do have questions, you can reach out through me or as we've listed this, the contact info. Thank you for listening. If you have questions, certainly don't be bashful. Reach out, take action before July when that first bill comes out. Thank you.
This program was made possible by your Franklin friends and neighbors, good folks just like you. Thanks for supporting Franklin TV. And thanks for watching.